On today's episode of Crystal Uncorked, I am talking to somebody who I just adore, and that's my California photographer, Marcy Browe. Make sure you follow her on Instagram, Marcy, BROWE_photo. We'll link to her. You know, I've worked with her over these years for Crystal Media and Crystal Uncorked photos, and she's always made me feel so comfortable and has brought my vision to life. And today she's talking about some of her tips to help businesses with their personal branding. We also talk about how to feel more confident in front of the camera, whether you're getting photos done, and even if it's like a selfie that you're taking. It doesn't have to be professional photos, like just how to feel more confident in front of the camera for photos or videos. This conversation actually has a lot of layers. I love the different channels and roads that we went down together while we're drinking our fabulous glasses of red wine. She has one of my favorite wines. I mean, she is just such a wealth of information. She is such a good human. We share some good tips. She shares some good tips at the end too about how to just live a little bit more of a sustainable life and how to run your business that way as well as personally. So I can't wait for you to listen. Definitely go check her out on Instagram. If you're local, hire her. She's the best. And let's dive into this episode. Hello, I'm Crystal Vilkaitis. I'm a curious, wine-loving entrepreneur who loves to learn and have open and honest conversations. Join me and my amazing guests as we talk about all sorts of relatable business and life stuff. It's my goal that you'll have fun, learn something new, and get inspired. Wine is not required, but is recommended. This is Crystal Uncorked. Marcy, welcome to Crystal Uncorked. I'm thrilled you're here.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for having me, Crystal. It's such an honor.
I know. This is going to be a really fun conversation. You are my I have to say California photographer.
I know. You don't want to sound like you're cheating. I get it.
I know. I do have my Colorado photographer. And we have worked together over these several years. And I'm so excited to talk about personal branding today and building your brand brilliance. Yep. I mean, unleashing your branding.
Unleash it and then build it, or build it and then unleash it,
Exactly. I love it. But before we dive in, what are you drinking?
Okay, so I got a wine with you in mind because I know that you are a fan of Joel Gott. So I'm drinking a Joel Gott Cabernet.
Oh my gosh,
and then
excellent.
What about you?
Well, I have this. You're going to have to try since you're local here in Southern California. Have you been to Burtech Winery yet?
No. Is that in Encinitas?
Okay. Yes.
Okay. I heard you talk about it on another episode.
Yes. I'm a big fan and I'm a member of their wine, so I'm always fully stocked. And actually, Dominic Burtech is going to be on the show in a couple of weeks, which is fun. But I have a Syrah and it's delicious. So cheers to our awesome wines.
Cheers.
All right. Now, as I was preparing for this, I was like, I feel like there's a lot of things we can actually talk about because you are a business owner. I have a lot of curiosity of being a photographer, the people that you're working with. You also have such an interesting life where you and your husband pack up like you guys were living in Mexico this summer, right? The whole summer?
Yes. So because he's a teacher, so we have a lot of time to play with. And as you know, being an entrepreneur, you have a lot of freedom with your schedule, but the hard part is actually like utilizing that freedom and taking that time.
Right. Totally. Well, you guys kind of are forced to, I feel like, with the summertime, but like not forced. I mean, allowed to, there's that extra space, but you guys really take advantage of that time, which I love seeing and following along with. It's so cool. But we are talking about personal branding today. Mm-hmm. You have a lot of experience from a branding perspective, being a photographer and really just helping people's voice and brand come to life.
Yep.
And I mean, I've certainly experienced that both in Crystal Media and Crystal Uncorked.
Right.
And so I would love for you to just share a little bit first about you and when you got started with your photography business. And then we're going to dive into some personal branding stuff.
Sure. So I got started, like a lot of people, it was a hobby, but I was given a little bit of a nudge because my grandfather made his living as a photographer. So it was very much in my family. He had a lot of cameras around, and I ended up using one of his cameras to learn. I took a class in high school and then a class again in college. So it was a hobby, and I discovered early on that I really liked photographing people. So that was my love as a photographer. And there was just a whole lot of years where it was really just something I did. I really didn't even earn a lot of money at it because I had a corporate job. I got a degree in advertising. So I graduated and then went right to work in the field of advertising and marketing. And then the photography was just a side hustle. And then eventually I turned it into my main gig. So I have, a big, strong corporate background and also kind of the entrepreneurial background. So I think that's kind of a great blend of experiences.
Oh, for sure. Now, when you went off and said, I'm going to totally commit to photography, like, was that a scary move or exciting? Like,
yeah. Yeah, it was scary because I was making pretty good money. I worked I worked for a company doing their marketing, and they had a huge budget. And I was at the point in my career where I was making pretty good money. But then I got together with the guy that's my husband, and I saw the way he lived his life. And it was interesting because he's someone I knew from years ago. We both went to high school together in New Jersey and then reconnected later in California. So I was getting to know him again as an adult. And by this time he had had a career as a Marine, and he left that to become a teacher. So as I was getting to know him, I was so inspired because he's the kind of person that like squeezed every ounce out of his vacations. He would go from high school graduation, get in his car or get on a plane, and he would gone all summer. And here I am working the corporate job, and I'm like, this is not the right decision. Like, here you are having all this fun. So for me, I was like, how can I architect my life so I can really enjoy the lifestyle that he has inspired me to do? So really, it was scary. And I think there's a lot of people out there that have done the same thing. And I had built up a little bit of a nest egg when I knew I was going to leave. I had 10 months of a runway. I had 10 months before I knew I was going to give my notice. So I had been saving money. At that time, I was living in Los Angeles, and I was doing a long distance relationship with Rick in Oceanside. And then I left. I left, gave my notice, and started building a photography business. And I had moved to a new town. I didn't know hardly anybody. So yeah, it was scary. In the first years, I think I made like $6,000 my first year in business. So it was just like very demoralizing. But I gave myself 3 years. I said, I'm going to do this slow and intentionally. So that, I think, was the mental capacity that I needed, because I knew I was not going to kill it overnight. I had a lot to learn, and just so much to learn. And in hindsight, it's almost like, would you agree that it's almost nice in hindsight to have the rose-colored glasses, because you probably wouldn't do half of the entrepreneurial stuff if you knew how
Amen.
and it's an emotional journey. So yeah, I'm glad that I didn't.
It so is. I mean, if people are like, this is actually what it looks like, are you still ready to do it? I mean, not that I would say no, but I do think that some would. And I do think that you approach it a little bit differently. Like that naivety, is that the right word? Like being naive really can help in that sense.
It does. Yes.
And I love that you gave yourself, like, you had such a nice runway, and you gave yourself 3 years. Like, there wasn't this pressure that I'm going to become Oceanside's top photographer in 1 year, and I'm going to hustle my ass off and do whatever I can and kill myself over it. Like you said, I'm committing to this, and I have 3 years, which gives you that space to breathe and expand and kind of figure out what you want to do and who you want to work with. And did you ever do weddings and other type of photography, or has it mostly been like one, like
brand.
your
Yeah. So when I
right.
first started, I did a lot of family photography. So the traditional family photo shoot. And I never did weddings. I did a few here and there, but nothing that I ever marketed. And so I didn't know I was going to do branding photography right out of the gate, but it became very clear to me that my passion and my interest was still in the I had this degree in advertising, and I loved marketing. I got to do some really high level marketing when I worked in corporate. So that became very obvious to me pretty soon into the photography journey, that one, it was more interesting to me. Two, it was just fit in my wheelhouse. And three, I got to work with a lot more interesting people, because I love family photo shoots. I mean, it's really fun, but it's not, you're having very different conversations when you're wrangling toddlers versus talking with entrepreneurs. So I was just like so excited to really build that branding side. But that took some time to figure out where I was going to land. So then I did kind of niche down a little bit into branding, and that's been for several years now. That's been my only focus.
Awesome. I remember when we first found you, I had Erica, who was on my team, like do some research of local photographers, and she showed me people's portfolios. And I was just like, I love Marcy's photos. Like, I just felt like there was something special and unique to them, where it was more like, it told more of a story, and it felt more like human and connection versus just a headshot. And so then when you came into the office and just, you had such great questions, and it was really about the brand and the feeling and the messaging. And I was like, this girl knows what she's talking about. Like, because it is so much more than just that headshot when we're talking about personal branding, which is a great kind of transition, prepping for this. I mentioned you, obviously social media, and my company Crystal Media does social media education, and it is like one of the number one platforms, if not the number one, that, to really build the relationship and get reach in front of new people and maintain that relationship with people. And you really, it takes so much more than just like snapping a photo of yourself, like there's so much more. And I really feel like you have to have the humanized element to have social really produce. And that's where we're seeing like these influencers just take off, because they're themselves, they're real, they're raw, and there's a human attached to it. Brands can still do it, but I think it's kind of harder if it's just a faceless brand.
Right.
But I would love to hear from you. Like, I know that you teach this. And you kind of have like a 4-part series that I, saw on your website that I loved and was like, this would be great to talk about. So will you share with us, like, how does somebody unleash their branding brilliance?
Right. Well, I think you are a perfect example of someone that has evolved and morphed with their brand. So I think, just kind of using you as the example, really, it starts with a conversation. So the first time that we had met, you were looking to put yourself out there with your Crystal Media side of your offerings. And so with everyone that I work with, it really starts with a conversation. And that it's basically me interviewing the person, because I have to get in their head, and I ask them questions like, how do you want to be seen? How do you want people to talk about you when you're not in the room? Who's your ideal client or audience that you're trying to connect with? And then really the end result is that I'm trying to help people look the part that they want to look. Some people have a vision of where they want to go. And so really I need to help get them create the vision for them, telling the story and creating the vision. So I have a process that I do with my clients, and I take them through this interview process, and then what they get in return is they get a branding guide. So I need to do this in order to plan the photo shoot, because everyone's different. And that's the whole point of the brand, is that you want to stand out from other people doing similar things from you. So the person that I'm working with, they get this guide that's a result of me interviewing them pre-photo shoot. And then they have this document they can refer to with all this language that they can use or ideas of how to position themselves. And so essentially it's really just like, how can I market this person? So everything I do has kind of this marketing spin on it. And every person's different. And the people that have this great vision for themselves are kind of fun and easy to work with. Like you are in that category. And I'll circle back to that. But some people don't know that's a little trickier, because some people, like, let's just take real estate agents. And I know Dustin is a realtor. There's a lot of realtors. So it is certainly not the kind of occupation that you have, if that is like rare and unique. So when I work with people like that, it takes a lot more digging and really kind of trying to find that angle that makes them different. But for you, what was really fun is you had a vision for your Crystal Uncorked. And for your Crystal Media too. But I'm really thinking of our more recent photo shoot. And you came with all of these ideas, and you had this like really clear sense of where you wanted your platform to go. So that's incredibly fun, because then I get to just take that vision and make it happen. And I'm laughing because I'm just picturing you sitting. You showed me an example of one photo of like the hot mess. And it's so funny that Pauline was there for your photo shoot. She was just like helping in the background with this like crazy photo idea you had. But I love that because you had a clear vision, and that helps with your brand. It really helps.
Oh my God. I want to just touch on that. And anybody that's listening to this, you'll have to go over to my website to see these photos. And I've been saving this. It's like my favorite photo, I think, that you took. It's so good. And the videos are so funny because it's like, just to explain it, anybody on audio, like I'm sitting in a chair. Marcy is photographing me, obviously. Pauline is behind me. She's not in the shot, but she is taking these big, like 8x10 kind of white cardboard, and just like making it rain on me.
Yep.
And I saw this picture of just all these things come crumbling down, but this woman in the picture was just like, she's still there, she's got it, she's bold, she's fine. And here we are, like Pauline's doing this, and I'm just getting hit in the head, hitting in the shoulder, hitting the wine glass, and I have to keep a straight face. And I'm just like, oh my God. I hear Pauline laughing. Like we're all trying to keep it together.
I know we only had a couple takes because there's only so many times you can do a shot like this. So I was trying so hard to be behind the camera not laughing because I didn't want you to crack and lose character. But it was really funny. But that's the perfect example of someone like you that's just so clear on, and you had the opportunity to kind of rebrand yourself, because this podcast and this platform, it really allows you to tap into something different than you allow yourself to with the Crystal Media, because this one's a little more raw. You're going to drop some F-bombs here and there, and you're talking about things, you're a lot more vulnerable. And, whereas Crystal Media, you have to be the expert and you're the one like driving the bus. And this really allows you to show the other side of yourself, which I really love that you've kind of rebranded yourself. I shouldn't say rebranded, but I think you've opened up a different side of your brand here. Yeah. So that's it's really been really fun to watch your journey, because you're really killing it with like putting yourself out there in like such a great, real, authentic way.
Thank you, Marcy. I mean, I can't tell you how much I know you listen to the show, and I say this on the show a lot. Like, I truly love doing this show. I think I've said it 3 times to Dustin today alone. I'm just like, oh my God, I love doing this show. And what's kind of interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
I just guess, do you find it to be a distraction from your other whole business? Like, I'm curious about that, because you have people that listen to this podcast might not realize that you're running a full team of people. You're full on. So like, how does that work for you?
Well, it can be a lot. I mean, I'll be honest. Some days are better than others. And there's this kind of like frustration I have a little bit, because I love it so much and I want to be doing so much more with it. Like, I have a lot of ideas, and even just showing up more on social media, which I teach at the other business, like I just get this frustration that I'm not doing what I could be. And sometimes that keeps me up at night. And then there's also these thoughts of like, I should stop doing it because right now, Crystal Media is really busy, like the busiest we've been all year. And like I've needed to be more involved too. I've worked hard at delegating to the team, but we're really focusing on scaling the business right now. And it is just requiring more of my time. And so it's like, gosh, should I pretend like we have seasons now? So season 1 of Crystal Uncorked is done, and then I take a break and I'll come back. But I just feel so strongly like I don't want to take a break. I want to keep going. I need to figure out like just make it work because I get so much out of it. I learn. So it gives me more energy for everything else that I'm doing. But there are certainly those times, and, in knowing like I could be doing more, you kind of feel like, oh, I'm spending all this time doing these interviews. Like I'm not doing the best I could market it, so there's an element of that, but it does give me a lot of joy. So.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that. And this is like very much a selfish reason, because for you to say that you feel like you're not doing enough and you feel like you should be doing more for both of your businesses, I look at what you do and I think you're doing a phenomenal job because, I'm like, if Crystal feels like she's not doing enough, then I'm just gonna like be happy with what I'm doing because I constantly feel like I'm not doing enough. So, and I hear that's a recurring theme I hear from you on your podcast. So, it's interesting just to hear you say that because on the outside, I feel like it looks like you have your shit together and you have it all figured out and you're doing all the right things and you have a team in place. But, thank you for being vulnerable and, admitting that you might not necessarily like feel like you're doing enough.
Well, that is one thing that I promised myself going into this is that I will be vulnerable and I will be open because I felt like you don't always get that. Like I go to a lot of business conferences or used to, kind of before COVID. And it was so much of like the 6-figure launch and 7-figure business and all these things. And I'm like, can we talk about like some of the hard times and like how long it did take you to get there? How much money you're spending to get a 6-figure business? Like it's
And the 6-figure business is that's not like that difficult to do, but don't you find that the more someone talks about how much money they're making or how much their launch went, I find I shouldn't loop you into this. Let me reframe this. I find that so that's a red flag for me. When I hear people talking about how much money they're making, or if they're standing with the Lamborghini in the background and they're like, this is my Lamborghini and you can have one too if you follow my method. I can't stand that. It's just, and I think that maybe we're moving away from that. I'm not really sure, but that to me is a red flag. And I'm just like, you just became a total cheese ball in my mind. And I just think your authenticity just went down.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that we're having this conversation. I mean, this kind of off the cuff, unplanned conversation, because I actually got really caught up in that stuff, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I definitely lost my voice and my vision along the way. I think it's very easy to get caught up in that because it's all marketing. We know that, right? It's all messaging and marketing and the lifestyle that you could have and all this stuff. And I got kind of carried away in it, but I'm grateful for it because it gave me that perspective and to ask better questions of myself of what I really want and not being so naive of what other people are doing and what they're selling. But Marcy, what if somebody came to you and was like, I need photos. I rented a jet for the day and a Ferrari for the day. And I want to look like hot shit, and really just, what would you do?
Yeah, I would probably work with them because my goal is to create people's vision that they have for themselves. And if that's the vision, now, if they were unethical or I felt slimy, I wouldn't. But if somebody was just being a fake and a phony and maybe they had a bigger agenda that felt right to me, I would totally do it. And because, for me, there's a lot of times people come to me and they have ideas, and it's not really my role to be like, well, I don't really think that lands that well. Sometimes I'll nudge them in different directions, but honestly, if that's their vision and they're tied to it, then my job, if they're paying me, my job is to create that vision for them.
Yeah, totally. I mean, if they were like, here's what I want to do, this, Lamborghini and jet and all this, but can you work with me on price? Can it be half off? And like all this stuff, that might be a little bit of a flag too, but you're right. Like, you're just bringing these visions to life. And through working with you, this is one of the reasons I love working with you. You do ask those questions to help. You've made me think like deeper about my businesses, of really, what is it that I want? There's so much more than standing in front of the camera and smiling. Like, there's just so much more. So when you have somebody like that realtor that you were talking about, who, there's a ton of them, how do you really separate? Like, what are some of your things that you walk people through to get to that other side?
Sure. I'll use an example that I just photographed a woman recently, and she is in the mortgage industry, but she's getting her real estate license. So she's in the real estate industry, but she's crossing into being a realtor. And she was one of those people that was really stuck with how to differentiate herself. So what kind of percolated to the surface when we were having this conversation, I was asking her about, okay, so she lives in Oceanside, and which is where you and I live. And so if people are listening or watching and they don't live in Oceanside is a town that has a military base, but it's on the beach, and it's kind of the last chunk of land between all this beautiful, valuable beachfront real estate and a marine base that's not going anywhere. So Oceanside, like the last spit of land that is to be developed. And I'm mentioning this because Oceanside has a really gritty edge. It has a real mix, I should say, of people that love the beach and have money. And then there's like this gritty side. So it's a very complex town. So when I was talking with her, I was asking her about, did she grow up in Oceanside? And she said, no, but she's raised her kid here for the last 18 years. And she knows this town really well. And so what came out of this conversation with this realtor was, I said, that's your secret sauce. I said, you're the person, it sounds like you're the person that is going to help a buyer or seller know exactly what neighborhoods are right for them, because you know this town in and out. You've raised your kid is a senior in high school. You know about the schools, you know the nitty gritty, you know the good, bad, and the ugly. And she was like, well, I don't want to market just to Oceanside. And I said, you don't have to market just to Oceanside. You can be more broad geographically. However, if you're doing a marketing campaign, or the realtors love to do their mailers, or, they have certain things that they're coached to do in the industry. Right. So I said, when you're doing an Oceanside specific campaign, really embrace the fact that you've seen this town through the good, the bad, and the ugly, and you're going to be honest. And I think that was something that didn't occur to her. But other realtors, for example, I have someone I've worked with, and she lives in Carlsbad, which is the neighboring town to Oceanside, and she wants to really focus on marketing to her neighbors. So for her, I was like, okay, well, what do you do? How do you know? She's like, well, my neighbors don't even know me because I walk my dog all the time. And it was this gorgeous, like Goldie Doodle dog. She's like, they just know the dog. I'm like, well, there's your marketing. You're going to be in the photos with your dog. And that's, when you market to your neighbors, they'll be like, oh, that's the dog's mom.
Yes.
Just finding the nuggets like that, like really the things that people might not even know is their magic, and turning it into something they can really use, because then they can speak from an authentic place. They don't have to try to be something that they're not. And if you give people a niche, you don't want to be too broad. You don't want to say, I work with everybody. You really want to say, I can work with everybody, but here's who I love working with. And people ask me that about my business all the time. They're like, well, do you work with men? I don't see a lot of men, when you're putting out your work. And I said, yeah, of course I work with men, but I market to women. So
Mm.
really, I'm intentional about attracting women like you into my business and into my life. But of course, if there's men that come along, I'm going to work with them if they're the right fit, but
Right.
they're not my marketing demographic.
Right. I love that. So, I mean, that's such a great point. I think about your Instagram, and it is, I can so tell, like, if I go to your Instagram, who your perfect customer is
Mhm.
and who you really want to attract. But that doesn't mean, like, if you shot somebody else and a guy, you have that capability. But I love that you're very strategic on what you're posting to
Yeah.
represent that for you.
Yep.
And, I feel like, businesses or entrepreneurs can have this fear of being too niche.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's like, no, but I want to work with everybody, or I don't want to, exclude anybody. And I'm brand new, especially if you're new, there's
Yeah.
like that scarcity mindset that you don't want to exclude anybody. But
Yep.
I'll just say, like, Crystal Media is a very niche business where we work with independent mom and pop retail shops. And technically, we could even be more niche where it could just be pet stores and that's
Sure.
it, or
Yeah.
just gift shops, right? And so
Yeah.
we've thought, like, do we open up and say we work with small businesses? But that really changes the
Does.
messaging. And so but there's that fear sometimes of, like, oh, we're too niche, it's too niche. But I will tell you, I just really feel like that is something that is what does set you apart, to your point
Mhm.
of really being clear, like, who you want to work with and can best serve.
Mhm.
And, like, trust that, right? Like,
Yes.
moving forward and market to that. It's so critical.
Yes, and it's so true. And I've known, when I talk about what you do when you're in the Crystal Media side, I always say she's social media for retailers. And I guess the mom and pop is even more of a way, because you're not working for like Best Buy. You're working for
Right.
the people that are in charge of their own marketing for their location, and that I think is genius. Because yes, if someone came along and they worked, they were like I don't know, like an esthetician, yeah, you could help them, but you're not marketing to that person.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And, I love your example with the realtor, because you probably know we are in escrow on our house here.
I know.
We're
I'm happy and sad at the same time.
I know. I'm like, remember we talked about going to privateer like years ago and
Yeah.
sitting on the patio. I feel like you do that a lot. I went there once. I'm like, this place is great. Marcy
Yep.
recommended this great place. We just did not get to spend enough time together, unfortunately. I hope to see you though.
I know, but
Yeah.
when are you moving? Like, all right, okay, I just watched the episode where you were really in a state of ambivalence about whether you're going to sell or rent. So
Right.
you're renting, you sold your house. I would.
So we went a totally different direction and we sold it. And why I bring that up is, like, we had these people who were seeing our house. Obviously, we had an open house and we've got people walking through here, and we had a couple of offers. And I'm like, not to sound like elite or any, like, bragging. I don't know why I feel like I have to say that, but we really do live in a great neighborhood in Oceanside. Like, it is a little higher end.
Yes.
It's safe. It's nice. It's wider streets. It's bigger homes.
You have nice neighbors too. That makes a huge difference.
Yes. Yes. I mean, they're basically like all retired neighbors. I definitely am the youngest owner in this neighborhood, but, like, it's so safe and quiet, and it's a gorgeous neighborhood. And we had the people who are actually buying our house that put the offer in are from Chino Hills. And I'm like, does the agent understand this neighborhood? Like, what I want people to really understand, because we lived across the street and it's the same area, but it was a different neighborhood and it was a very different feel than what you get here.
Yes.
And if you don't have these agents that really understand those areas. So my whole point is, like, the lady you were working with, that's a great unique value proposition. You're right.
She's going to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that builds a lot of trust. And so that might mean, like, it's mostly what you're marketing to is Oceanside, but I think that you'll have that phone ring more when people are looking like that credible source, what you do, and don't be afraid to move into that, especially if you feel like it's narrow.
Exactly.
There's a lot of business.
And so not to beat this subject to death, but to put a finer point on this. When I first started my business, I still do a ton of networking. But I was in this networking group called BNI, and we
me too.
Oh, okay. Yep. So they teach you how to network, and they this sticks in my head. Every week when you meet with this group, as you know, you have to stand up and you do your ask. You ask your team of referral partners how they can send you a referral, and they always said, be specific. Say, I'm looking for a mom and pop retailer that is growing on social media and has just started being more active on Instagram. Boom.
Yep.
That's your ask, because someone, you're going to think about, oh, okay, yeah, maybe let me think, as opposed to like, I want anyone that wants to do social media. You're like, well, then that person's, you're going to go right out of their head. But the next time they're at their favorite boutique, they'll be like, Crystal wants this connection. So the more specific, the better.
Oh, for sure. And that applies to your social media content, because one thing I hear all the time from our retailers is, I don't have time. And I was just saying this too, like, it's so hard to do what you want to do. But like, there will be retailers who haven't posted in months. And I think what a lot of businesses struggle with is they aren't clear on the specific ask of the audience and how they can serve. Because if you get really clear, it is easier to create that content for those people online. Whereas if you're just like big and broad, you're like, well, what do I talk about today? It's the same thing I talked about yesterday. Like, you can go deeper and just add so much more value, which will really help you stand out.
Yes.
Now I have to ask, because speaking of my mom and pops, like, one of the things that I teach them a lot, like, we really try to get them to go live on Facebook or Instagram, like really use video. It's such a strong tool. There is a lot of insecurities with people being on camera, and to where I have had several retailers cry because they overcame that fear. It was like, it was holding me back, and you always talked about doing it. And I was like, I can't imagine, but I just did it anyways. And now I'm seeing the results, and I overcame that, and I can do it, and I'm empowered. And I just feel like you probably experience that because you're behind the camera. Like, what do you, I mean, I'm kind of like, what do you have?
Okay. I get where you're going. And I see every insecurity. So what I always like to say, and it's a terrible sentiment, but it's so true, because it's really for the women in this audience. I say, if you want to know what a woman does not like about herself, just listen, because she's going to tell you. And it's really, every time somebody starts a photo shoot, like, oh, they tell me the thing that they don't like about themselves, because they're like, okay, pay attention to this, because I don't like the way my arms look, or I don't like when I smile a certain way. But I hear all the insecurities. And, really what I like to say before a photo shoot, if I can tell that someone's a little bit insecure, is I say, I'm going to just set my camera up, and I'll just kind of like do my little thing on my camera. And I say, while I'm doing this, I want you to take some breaths in, and I really want you to tap into the intention of why you're here. This is not about you. This is about your business. And I really want you to tap into the reasons that you booked this photo shoot, and the intentions of what you're trying to build, and all those things you told me. Because by the time I have them in front of the photo shoot and hair and makeup's done, I already know a lot about them. So it's a good reminder for people that when they're going live or they're putting themselves out there, it's not a vanity project. It's not about them. They're not a Kardashian. Okay. No one's going to expect them to look perfect. No one's going to expect them to be camera ready. They're not a news anchor. It's about it's about their store, or what they're selling, or the project they're doing. And I think if people just can shift that mindset and really get into the place of like, what am I here to do? How am I here to serve? What am I here to sell or to share? Then it takes all the spotlight off of them. Because people get really freaked out with the camera, and camera's not flattering. So when you have your phone pointed at you, it's so unflattering, because this is, I don't even have the new iPhone. I have an old one, but this is a wide angle lens. Okay. So when you're putting this thing in front of your face, it is distorting your face. It's making things look bigger than they should be. It's making things look warped. So what you're seeing when you're turning it in selfie mode and you're doing the live, it's not what people see when they're physically in the room breathing the same air as you are. So just give yourself grace, because it can be very unflattering. So just know that.
Right. Well, and I feel like that's such great advice. It's not about them. It is about the people they want to serve, and that intention, and how I can help and really channel that before a photo shoot or before you go live. Like, it does probably just take off that pressure that we all put on ourselves, because we are the ones in front of the camera. But when you really think about the person on the other side, that delivers a completely different experience. And that can help people get really into themselves, because I think that we can totally change, right? Like, people can just change and become very different in front of a camera.
Very different. Yes. And always think when you're doing a live or a selfie, or if you're at a photo shoot, really just look at that camera lens like you're looking at someone, and have a conversation with a person. And even that person is probably not in the room, but talk to the camera like you would talk to your friend or your mom or your sister or your coworker, because you're going to speak differently if you're like, I'm trying to think of what I like my script. You're gonna get flustered. But if you're like, hey, Crystal, let me just talk to you about this thing. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited because blah blah blah. You just then turn into a different energy space when you're talking to a person and not a piece of equipment.
Oh my God, totally. We talk about this even for writing emails. Like, think of your perfect person. And if it was like Marcy, I love working with Marcy. She comes in all the time. She spends so much money. She brings all these people with her. I am writing this email for Marcy.
Right.
I am looking at this camera and it is Marcy. Like, you just have to channel those people. And I do this actually. So I often get nervous when I speak in person. Like, I love speaking and being on a stage, but I still get nervous. And I've talked about this on the show. And like, sometimes I'll feel it in the Uber on the way there, or if I'm walking there. And what I do now, what part of my process is, I think about my mom. And I'm just like, if my mama was in the audience, like, she just loves me. She just is like, I'm so proud of you. It doesn't matter what I'm talking about. I could be saying total bullshit up there, and she would just be like, I'm so proud, like. So I just kind of try to channel her, because I really want to speak as if I was talking to my mom, because I am more of that personal conversation. Like, that's how I want to deliver a message.
Yes.
And so, and that's where I feel comfortable. So that is such good advice, Marcy. Such good advice. Love it. I remember one of my insecurities working with you, I was like, I sweat a lot. So we got to make sure. Make sure I'm not sweating, or that you can't see. I think I even had toilet paper in some of our.
I was going to say, did you use the maxi pad trick under the armpits?
Yeah, we had something that we put in there to help prevent.
I remember that. I couldn't remember if we stuffed paper towels or maxi pads. But then you were also wearing these really tight, like thin turtlenecks. So I was like, hopefully this doesn't show, but it didn't. But I know. And it is really like nerve wracking. The sweating happens.
Oh my God. I sweat all the time. It's so weird. Like, I will have a phone call, just a random, normal, fine phone call, and I'll go out, and Dustin's like, whoa. You're like really sweating. It's so weird. So side note. Okay. So what else? Is there anything else? I mean, I feel like we could talk obviously a lot. There could be like, you probably have a long workshop about personal branding, but are there one or two more tips that you want to leave the audience with as it relates to personal branding?
Sure. Yeah. And I think that the term personal branding has become kind of in vogue recently, and it could be a little worn out by now, but essentially, really truly, your personal brand is how you want people to think about you. And so for me, it all starts with your vision. And I'm a big self-development person. I love doing journal prompts or reading books that help really help me get clear. And I know you are too, Crystal. Like, you're the kind of person that is always wanting to learn and grow and stretch. I think that growth mindset goes hand in hand with creating a personal brand, because if you're stuck and you don't know what your vision is for yourself or your business, I would really encourage you to either find some personal development, ask people that are into it, because there's no shortage of it. You go into the bookstore now and you go to the aisle of I don't even know what it's called. There's like business aisle, and there's self-development, and then there's I don't even know all the labels they have. There's thousands of books on the shelves, and then not to mention all the books you can get online. But if you're really stuck with how to create a personal brand, it all comes from just doing those self-inquisitions, asking yourself questions. I'm a big journaler. So for me, I love to create visions. And you mentioned this in a previous podcast about how your vision, you were talking about how you kind of put like an intention out there, a vision for where you wanted to live, and you almost like threw it away and forgot about it. And then fast forward to the future, you woke up almost in a moment and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm sitting in the vision I created for myself. And so that is the underlying key to all of the personal branding, is to really be clear on what you want to create for yourself and what you want to create for the world, how you want to give back, the impact you want to leave, because all of that is so much more meaningful than I got to think of a meme or a caption for this cute photo. Because for me, it's not just about creating cute photos. You're going to get photos that you like of yourself, but that's not the intention. The intention is to really promote what you're trying to put out there. So I think that's, that for me, that's it. It's just really putting the work into doing the self-development, and it never stops. I love doing the self-development work. So it really helps when you know where you're going, because then you can, help the path to get there just becomes easier.
Totally. Well, and knowing some of those questions in your journal prompt that's something that I feel, if you have time to just kind of like have an open space to think and just whatever comes to you, or asking certain questions, even like, how do I want to show up? Who is my perfect, like, who do I love working with?
Yes.
Why do I love working with them?
Yes.
Like when they see my website, my social, my whatever, like, how do I want them to feel? And like journal and think of those words and really create that can really help you get a little bit more clear on the actual, like the creative of all of it, the images and video and messaging. So I love that.
Yes.
Awesome.
And the perfect person concept is awesome. I do that all the time when I journal. I have a few different journaling processes I do, and I don't journal every day consistently. And in fact, it freaks me out when people are like, this is my morning routine and I do it every day, and aren't I perfect? No. I think let's leave a lot of room for imperfection here. But when I do journal, sometimes I have this like gratitude process, and I learned it from Tim Ferriss, who has a pretty extensive podcast. He's also an author of the 4-Hour Work Week, et cetera, et cetera. But Tim Ferriss has a journaling process that he uses, and it starts with like, what am I grateful for? What would make today great? What was a highlight from yesterday? What am I looking forward to for today? It just kind of, it gives you some tools. And so what I do in that process, when I say, what am I grateful for? I always write down the clients that I've had in my business that I'm like really grateful for. And it's fun because then I'll go back to my journal from like a year ago. I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot. Because I worked with this person and they've come and they've gone and now they're doing all these great things. But I'm like, oh my gosh, I was so grateful to work with all these people. And then look, in my future, in my current, there's people just like that are just building and being attracted. So really the idea of creating the energy around what you want to create and who you're thankful for and why you're thankful for them, the universe. And I don't mean to get too woo-woo, but whoever's out there with these cosmic rays, the universe is matching your energy. So if you are, and I love this, I love the way this is framed by one of my favorite teachers, Esther Hicks. She talks about the concept that gratitude, she frames it and she uses the word appreciation. And the reason that it really resonated, it hit home as soon as I heard her say why, it was like, boom, solidified in my head forever. Because she says that when you talk about being appreciative for something, if you think about appreciation from a monetary perspective, let's say your home appreciates in value. What that means is it's growing. So when you think about what you are appreciative for, it's like saying, dear creator, dear universe, dear karma, whatever. I really loved that this happened in my life. Can I have more, please? So it's acknowledging as opposed to being grateful, which almost takes the responsibility of something and puts it in a source outside of you. It takes the self responsibility out of it. But if you're appreciative for what you have and what is working, you're appreciating and collecting and growing more of that. So when I heard that analogy, I was like, done. Thank you. Got it. I love that analogy. I'm appreciating everything. So, really that really helps create more of what you want.
Right. You're amplifying appreciation. I mean, it's like amplifying gratitude to get more. Like it's the cycle of just filling more. And it's not like we're limited,
No.
there is unlimited amounts.
There's so much unlimited. And that's what I love. You mentioned this before that, coming into things with the scarcity mindset, that's really going to limit you. But if you are coming at things thinking, okay, you know what, there might be 500 people that are doing the same thing as me, but there's room for all of us. Really there's just unlimited amount of resources. And just because you can't see them doesn't mean that they don't exist.
Exactly. Yeah. And a big part of that is just trusting that it will be there. And I recorded an episode today about that too. Like trusting. Yeah. It's so important. I love that you brought up Esther Hicks too, because I love her. And I only recently found her YouTube channel is really where I binged.
Sure.
And, like last year, it was really during quarantine. Actually, it was a nice timing, but for some reason, I would listen mostly to her in my bath. I would have a bubble bath.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
And like candles. And I just have to say, if anybody is looking for some of that self-development, if you're feeling off, out of alignment, if you just kind of like want to further yourself and grow even more and understand things differently, understand yourself differently, like check out Esther Hicks on YouTube.
Yeah.
Great content.
I think she's just the godmother of radical self, just claiming and being responsible for your own life.
Yes.
That is, I think, what she's brought to my life is really taking radical responsibility for everything that happens to my life. And another person that I've started really listening to recently that's similar is Byron Katie. It's a woman. She sometimes goes by Katie. Okay, you know her, but she's the same thing. It's like, how are you telling yourselves these stories potentially that aren't even really true? How are you responsible for your own suffering? And my yoga teacher always says, really the yoga is to just relieve suffering, because to be a human is to suffer. But if we can figure out how to suffer less, then that's where the joy comes in. And it's, really at this point in my life, every time that I just take radical responsibility for how everything needs to go, sometimes it hurts because I have to say, yep, I've been responsible. I've created that dynamic, or I wasn't really truthful, or I've let this pattern happen too long. It kind of hurts. Because it's like a little bit of a slap in the face to yourself. You're like, oh, yep, I'm responsible for creating that. Yeah. But it really helps you just get out of your own way.
Yeah. Well, and it does take you out of that suffering. I mean, if we don't ask those hard questions and really look at ourselves in the mirror and let the ego go and just be like, okay, what was that about and what's happening here? And yeah, it can hurt. And sometimes you have to apologize to people and you're like, I handled that wrong. I did that wrong. Like all the things, but that's the only way that we really are growing and can provide more. And of course, the whole saying, like, new levels, new devils. I do believe that, like, as you keep growing and evolving. But yeah, I mean, excellent. I love Byron Katie. I started reading her book. I think it's called The Work, or she talks about.
I mean, that's
work.
what she calls her process, the work. So I don't know her books. I'm like you. I like my YouTube videos because then I can I do that in the morning when I'm getting myself ready. I'll put like a 20-minute Esther Hicks video on, and I'll be like, all right, when the timer goes off, I'm done. So, but it's like, kind of a passive thing you can do while you're doing something else.
Totally. Yep. Driving, walking, all those things. Great resources. I love it.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, Marcy, now before we wrap up here, I do know that you are very involved in the green scene locally
Mhm.
and just also have a passion for sustainability, being more environmentally conscious. Do you have, and I know, look, we could probably do a whole other episode about this, but like rapid fire 3 to 5-ish tips or whatever you're feeling
Yeah.
for a business or a person, whatever that
Sure.
looks like, that can be more environmentally conscious.
Oh, absolutely. And I think how you run your business is how you run your personal life. So these tips can just apply no matter where you are in your life. So first thing is just how you're shopping. Like, are you buying things that are wrapped in plastic? Are you buying things that aren't reusable? Just you're responsible for how much you're buying. Buy less shit. Okay. There you go.
That's the
And then
quote. That's the quote.
and then also really get clear on who you're voting for and what their policies are on the environment, because there's as an individual, you can only do so much. A lot of it has to do with lobbyists and lawmakers. So really get active in local government, all the way up to federal government, and just be not afraid to just ask questions and ask people, like your grocery store, or if you're in a retail environment, where they're sourcing things. And then for me, I really like to source things. Like, for instance, when I get my photo lab, when I print photos, they're a green lab. So I know that they, everything that they've done to create these photo prints and books and albums and artwork, it's all done with the highest standards of green. So really just getting clear on your supply chain and your vendors. But essentially just ask questions and really just buy less shit. Honestly, if I can make a bumper sticker that says buy less shit, that would be my motto. Because we just don't need all this stuff that we have. And I'm guilty of it too. I'm not preaching. It's a reminder to myself, but really just less is more. Simplify.
Yeah. Right. Well, and I mean, now the world of Amazon, it's so convenient to buy stuff. So you're like seeing something on the TV or Instagram, or your friend has something and it's just like, oh, I'll get that too. And then you're never using it. Or like subscription boxes, which I think is a good business model.
Yeah,
but some of these subscription boxes are like, you don't use half the shit in it.
That makes
and
me cringe. The subscription box, I know you're in a retail environment, so I'm certainly not going to diss all subscription boxes, but I think sometimes things end up in those that maybe aren't packaged that ethically. But I do have a suggestion with Amazon, because I love Amazon too, but you can actually save environmental and human resources if you don't choose ship it the next day. So if you buy something on Amazon, don't do it the next day unless you absolutely have to have it, because it'll save the human toll and it'll save the logistics behind the scenes. So that's a really easy, simple, low-hanging fruit thing that we can do. Just don't get something immediately unless you need it, because there is a lot of cost behind that click of that button.
Interesting. I never thought about that, but I mean, obviously you saying that makes sense. And most of the stuff that I feel like people are probably buying on Amazon, you can wait a day or two. You don't need it.
2 days versus 5 days. Like it's not like it's going to take 12 weeks.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Love it. Great tips. And I don't mean to like put that at the end like it's not very important. It is so important.
No, I love talking about it. So thank you for bringing it up. And I love the idea. And I don't think the world is hopeless. I know that there's a lot of news that's come out about the climate and everything, but it's not hopeless. We have endless capacities for creativity and innovation. So I think the worst thing we can do is just get the fear that it's a lost cause and nothing we can do will work, because it's not true. We're just so creative as a human species.
Oh, amen. I so agree. And that does create so much innovation, which is very exciting for us. So yeah, we're not hopeless. We are powerful and there are so many solutions, which I just so agree. Marcy, how can people connect with you? Instagram, right? Marcy Browe
Marcy Browe underscore photo. Yep. Instagram.
Yeah.
And I have a website, and I have on my website, it's marcybrowe.com. And my website has a brand planning guide. So if you're kind of curious about what your brand is, it's a workbook that I have put up on my website. You can download it for free, and you can figure out what your personal brand is and how to use it when you're putting yourself out there.
Love it. Okay. Anybody who is starting a business or wanting to change the brand, or if you're feeling off at all, or a friend who's starting something, I feel like there's been so many new businesses that have been created over the past year and a half with COVID shutdown. People are evolving. So that is a good resource. Thank you so much. We'll link to that. Marcy, I loved this conversation. It flew by. This is awesome. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. It was a true honor, and I am just cheering for you every time I see, how much you're evolving. I just want to give you so much credit for being a light and a beacon to other women, other business owners. So keep doing what you're doing, girl.
Oh, thank you so much. I love it. I love it. And I love you. Cheers one last time here.
Yay. Cheers.
All right, everybody. Be sure that you follow Marcy. Go check out her free download. If you are in the Oceanside, Southern California area and you need some new photos, she is your girl. She is my favorite. I will miss her dearly. Maybe we could sneak in some California shoots when I come back to visit. And everyone, I will see you on the next See You. Bye. Thank you so much for listening. Are you on Instagram? I'd love to see pictures of you listening to the show, a screenshot of your favorite episode, and or your favorite wines. Share them with me. Just follow and tag @Crystal Uncorked. I can't wait to see you there. All right, I'll see you on the next See You.